And if you would like to send any specific questions through on the chat, you are more than welcome to do so. And if we don't get to all of the questions, we will do so via email after, but we will try to get through as many as we can today. Hopefully Justin will answer all those questions anyway in his presentation. So Justin, we're going to let you take it away and we'll stop for some questions in a minute. Thanks, Justin.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Shannon. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the first Roadshow hosted by Consumer Friend for 2021. So we had to delay this Roadshow a little bit. We had a couple of things that we wanted to share with you later on down the line in the actual presentation. And everything is up and running. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to quickly share my presentation and we can then be good to go. Give me 1 second. Great. Shannon, do you just want to just check for me that you can see the presentation okay?
Yes, we're good to go, Just.
Perfect. Okay, great. All right, guys, so let's kick off. I'm just going to chat about the agenda quickly, then we can sort of have a look where we are going with the webinar. So I think the most important part is really just to get to the crux of the Consumer Friend operational processes. So we're going to be talking about that, and then we'll have a little Q&A section after that. So any questions that you may have dealing with Consumer Friend operations, please feel free to send the question through and we will get that answered. I'm then going to move on to a points of contact and escalations list. And I thought really just to have a separate section for this because it is important that you know exactly what our contact points are. And there's some discussions that I want to have around emails and correspondences going through to the same or to the correct email address. We're then going to move on to Papaya, the dreaded Papaya coming up in a little bit less than 3 months. And just to provide you some solutions with regard to the communication between you as a debt counselor and us as Consumer Friend. And then just before we end off, I'll do a discussion on DREX and I'll do a live demo for you. And there's some exciting announcements there as well with regard to a rebranding of DREX, which I'm very excited to share with you guys. So I'll take you through a little demo of exactly what it will look like, sorry. And then also just to show you the functionalities of DREX, where to pull a statement, where to look for certain things, etc. And then what I'll do is I'll also just give you a view of the consumer portal so that you can see exactly what your consumers see. So if they ever do contact you or you need to speak to them, you are at least in a position to know exactly what their view is. And again, we'll have a Q&A section on there, and then we'll end off this webinar with an announcement within the Consumer Friend space. So let's kick off with the operational processes. And I think the best place to start really is, who do we act for? I know it's a simple question, but I still get asked many times, who all of our clients are. So what I have done is I've listed all of our clients, just the overall credit provider that we do work for. There are obviously a lot of sub-credit providers that fall within some of the credit providers, RCS, Foschini, for example. They have a whole bunch of sub-credit providers that do fall under them, and that is contained in our mandate. So what we will do is after this webinar, I will send through some communication to you with a whole bunch of attachments, and the mandate will be one of them. And in that mandate, I set out exactly what those sub-credit providers are. So if we just run through this quickly, you can see it's Woolworths, it's Truworths, it's the RCS portfolio, and you can see here that I've just included a one-liner here for you to say including a selection of Edgar's and Jet accounts. So I just want to spend some time here just because I know that there's a lot of confusion perhaps in the industry between who handles the Edcon accounts now that Edcon is no longer there. And it's simple as it's been split into two. So RCS handles a portion, or by far majority portion of the Edcon books, and the Nimble group, they handle the rest of those. So if the account is not listed with us, it will then be with Nimble and vice versa. So the process we have there for you is if we receive a 17.1 and we note that, that you've mentioned that there is an Edcon account in there, and the account is not with RCS, what we will then do is we'll send an email back to you advising you that the account is not with RCS, and in which case you would then need to contact Nimble, and there will be an email address in that correspondence. So we will always provide you with some sort of communication as to where the account is. Should the account be listed with RCS, we will, of course, send you a COB in response to your 17.1, and the account will be on the portal for you to view. So that's just the distinction between the Edcon accounts. Let's move on to the Fushini Group, the Capfin Group, which is also sometimes cited as Century Capital. We've got our Sanlam Personal Loans division, which is part of the First Rand Bank Group under the Direct Access banner, but it's a separate provider that we handle for them, and it's only the Sanlam Personal Loans. We've got the JD Group, which is also referred to as Century Capital. We have our Connect Financial Solutions, Mr. Price Group, Full House Retail, Lencore, and then our most recent acquisition to the Consumer Friend family is the Vodacom accounts. So I think that the best step for us to go through now is just perhaps to look at the proposals, just simply because I feel that's where the crux of all the negotiations and the crux of debt review really comes from. So I've set out what our mandate is. I know I get that a lot from debt counsellors, what exactly is your mandate? So I think the way or the best way to approach this is to look at it and say, okay, a proposal will either come in via the DCRS system, or it will come in as a pro rata proposal or a non-DCRS proposal. So we do accept DCRS proposals. You will accept an acceptance from us. There are a couple of reasons as to why we cannot work a particular proposal, which I will go on to in my next slide, just to give you an indication as to why we can't accept a DCRS proposal. But it's not with regard to the proposed structure, it's more with regard to the structure of the proposal and various other items within the proposal, not the actual restructure itself. For pro rata proposals, we follow the assessed DCRS term rules specifically. So as you can see there, I've just a little table for all the unsecured debts, just dealing with where the balance fits in and the appropriate term extension that we would need. For the interest rates, we would request for a minimum of 9% interest on all pro rata accounts and 12% for the Sanlam personal loans. Again, there are a number of various mandates that we have from credit providers, and it does change from time to time. So we will let you know as and when that does. But this just gives you a nice indication of exactly where we stand with regard to pro rata proposals, so that you'll know if you will be getting an acceptance from us or not. Proposals that are slightly outside of the mandate will be accepted. So the reason that we've put that in there is we have noticed that there are occasions where a proposal will come through and it's a pro rata proposal and it's just very close to being outside of our mandate. So it would be, for example, 1 or 2 terms more, or perhaps a point of an interest less, for example. We will obviously apply our mind to that and we will issue a consent on that. I invite you guys to and I'll go through our contact points, but just to liaise with the proposals team if you are in a situation where the consumer is severely over indebted, or there are other merits that perhaps you would like us to look at in accepting a proposal. We can put that forward, and that is something that we can discuss internally. We can take that up with our client if we need to see if we can try and meet you halfway and get the proposal consented on. I also just want to mention the vehicle asset finance option of the RCS group. So if you guys may or may not know, RCS does offer a vehicle asset finance portion within or underneath their umbrella. And in terms of that, we would obviously need the terms to solve within the DCRS rules, which means that it's a term extension to 90 months, and then the interest rate to be at the contractual rate. Obviously, if it's a DCRS proposal, we will accept the proposal as per the DCRS rules for the vehicle finance. I think the next thing for us to perhaps go into now is just to look at the reasons why we reject the proposals. And I think this is where the frustration sometimes comes in from you as the debt counsellor, because you don't really perhaps understand why we are rejecting, or perhaps you find that the reason that we are rejecting a proposal may not be correct. So I just want to spend some time on this slide so that you have a proper understanding as to why we go through this process. So there are a number of reasons when a proposal will be rejected. So in this slide, I'm looking not because it's out of our mandate. I'm looking at perhaps issues that are on the proposal, information on the proposal that may not be 100% correct, or that we need some clarity on. So if we look at the first one, one of the options where you would get a rejection from us would be if the account numbers on the proposal are incorrect. Now, we had to take a stance on this because it has significantly reduced the number of payments that landed up in our suspense account because the correct account number has been used. And it's vital, especially within our space, just simply because we deal with a lot of credit providers within the consumer friend umbrella. So if we get a payment with an ID number on it, we won't necessarily know which credit provider to allocate those funds to unless we have a schedule attached with that. So in general, the payments that we get from the PDA, they will come with a schedule with that payment. You will be able to allocate it. But it's those ad hoc payments that sometimes happens, or if the reference number isn't loaded correctly at the PDA system, that a few things are going to happen. Firstly, the payments that we get, we're going to kick it back to the PDA because we can't match it to any account number on our system. So it's important that you guys use the account number that we give you on the COB and not the account number that appears on any of the bureaus. Unfortunately, the bureaus are, I don't want to say notorious, but it is often that the account numbers that they use is not necessarily the correct or the updated account number. What then happens is if you do use that reference number and you pay on that reference number, we're not able to allocate the funds because it doesn't match the account number we have on our system. So it's imperative that you use the account number that we provide you in our COB as a reference number when making payments and when capturing the data onto the system. And also if you're providing your consumer with a settlement balance or an instruction for them to make a payment or an ad hoc payment, that you just advise them to only put in the reference number, which is the account number, and we'll be able to allocate those monies automatically instead of having it lie in a suspense account, waiting for the account to be queried. Another reason why we could possibly reject a proposal is if the balance on the proposal is incorrect. Now, we did tweak our processes here a little, where we would insist on the COB balance being provided on the proposal. But we understand that throughout the process of debt review, it sometimes happens that an updated balance will have to be used because there's been some historical payments and interest that has accrued on the account. So as long as the COB balance or the current DREX updated balance is provided on the proposal, you should not be getting a decline or a rejection based on this reasoning. Again, we also took a very strong stance on this because we want to try and minimize the end balance differences as much as possible. Now, end balances within the industry, it's never going to end, but we need to try and shorten that end balance difference between your balance, between the PDA's balance, between our balance. And the best way we can do that is if we have the correct or the same starting point. The best starting point would be the COB or an updated balance where we be able to know from day dot, this is the balance, we apply the interest, we apply the payments, and if there is an end balance difference towards the end of the account, it's really going to be minimal. So that's just the reasoning behind us insisting that the balances on the proposal are correct. The third reasoning would be if an account is missing from the proposal. Now, I've had a few debates with you as the debt counselor on these. And the reason why we've taken this stance is simply because we feel that if the consumer has a credit agreement, all those credit agreements in terms of the Act need to be included in this debt rearrangement proposal. We feel that within the scope and the purpose of the Act, it is fair that the accounts are dealt with equally. Yes, there are various calculations and algorithms on how the proposal is determined. But at the end of the day, the account is incorporated within the account. So as an example, if an account like our Woolworths account, which is generally the most common account that does go missing sometimes, and the reasoning we get is to say, the consumer wants to use their Woolworths store account because they would like to use it to purchase food. That's not something we can allow within our space. The account has got to be blocked for debt review. It's got to be incorporated within the proposal. And simply because the consumer has stated that they don't want to incorporate it doesn't mean that it can now be excluded. All the accounts have to be included. And that would be a reason why you would get a decline on that, is if an account that falls within our umbrella has been excluded for that specific reason. One of the fourth reasons is if the expenses aren't clear on the proposal. And the reason, again, that we've taken this stance is just simply there are a number of expenses that fall under the proposal that sometimes are quite high, and legitimately so. We're not questioning that it isn't legitimate, but we just need to have comfort from our side that it isn't a credit provider, as an example, that has been excluded. We obviously understand that legal accounts are excluded from the debt review process, and that's a completely different story, and we'll accept that. But when it comes to expenses being listed on the proposal, we just need some sort of indication from you as to what an amount refers to. Now, I know that there are some system vendors out there which perhaps don't cater for you to manually put in the vast variety of expenses that a consumer does have. But I know that the system vendors do have a little box. It's called a recommendation box. And in there, if we can just ask you, and I've seen debt counsellors do that, where they just give a breakdown. So they'll, for example, say other consists of 2 or 3 expenses, bank charges, for example, that sort of thing. And that's what the 400 Rand is for. And we will then proceed to consent on that proposal. So if you can just give us some more information on what the others stands for, then we won't be in a position to actually do that. The second to last one is where other credit agreements are excluded from the proposal. So again, here we understand that legal accounts are excluded, and I'm not referring to these ones here. I'm referring to ones where, for example, the consumer doesn't want another account put under debt review, or perhaps another credit provider, for no other reason other than just not wanting to be part of the proposal, excludes the accounts. So this, again, is a stance we had to take because we just feel that it is fair if there are credit providers making concessions within the debt review process. All credit providers, bar the legal ones, of course, need to make a concession in terms of the debt review process. So it's important for us just to note that all credit agreements need to be included within the proposal in order for us to accept that. The last one is where payments only commence after 4 months. And again, the only reason for this is if we consent to a proposal where payments are only coming on down the line, we are in direct violation of the termination mandate that's currently out there. So we can't, if we need to terminate an account within 60 business days, payments need to start within that time period. Otherwise, the consumer is already in default in terms of the Act. So that is something that we would require clarity on, why payments only commence after a certain time period. I know that there are certain consumers that are very over indebted to such an extent that they are in a position where they can't perhaps afford to pay some of the accounts within the 4-month period. But there needs to be another way, an alternative way to try and get some payments towards the credit providers, because we will not be able to accept a proposal if payments come down months down the line, 8, 9, 10 months down the line, like I have seen before. I'm going to go on to your next slide. I will obviously take questions at the end of this section, and then we can talk about it. Another very common question I get is, what are your 17.3 change in processes? So again, the change in circumstance process is really handled in line with the circular that was issued by the NCR during the course of last year. And we obviously talked to the split that circular has in with regard to the change in circumstance, particularly in where the consumer is in the debt review process when this change occurs. So we obviously have the split where the change happens prior to the consumer going into the court process. We then have a change in circumstance that happens within the court process, but before the order is granted. And then we have a change in the process after the court order has been granted. And there's obviously a various different ways in which we would handle each of those scenarios. But I think the most common information that we will need here is really just in line with my point to the reasons need to be cited with the necessary proof. So I've noted 4 of the main reasons in which a change in circumstance would occur. The first being maternity leave, the second being incapacity, incapacitating illness or injury, if there's been a dismissal or a retrenchment, and then obviously if there's some sort of marriage dissolution. If the people are married in community of property, it obviously affects the way in which the whole proposal was actually structured. So it's important that when you do provide that 17.3 with us, you just provide us with some sort of background as to why the consumer is in this position, what's led to this. And then importantly, in terms of my point number 3, is that a revised proposal be provided to set out the new payment plan. Now, I know there are different scenarios in which a consumer cannot potentially provide a new proposal. You know, if the consumer has been dismissed, for example, a proposal cannot be put forward because there is no income. So that's an entirely different conversation that now needs to happen, because the question then is, can the consumer remain under debt review if they're not gainfully employed? I'm not going to discuss that here, but I think what's important is that if a proposal cannot be provided, that we get some sort of indication as to how the consumer aims to address the payments during this time period. Even if it is temporary, we would still need to know what's going to be done. And I say this because if we are able to accept the revised proposal, the account will be restructured. So it'll be restructured again if there is already a restructure in place in terms of this new revised proposal, so that the payments that now happen in terms of this change of circumstance will now be as per agreed, which means the consumer won't go into arrears, which means the consumer won't be getting SMSs to say that they're short paying on their account because there is a new arrangement in place. So I think it's important that we get some sort of indication from you as a debt counselor on how the consumer aims to address the payments going forward, whilst they are in this change of circumstance part of their lives, and how they aim to address it, and also how likely it is to last. You know, is this something that is going to affect them going forward? Is it perhaps something that's going to affect them, like maternity leave, for example, just for a couple of months? You know, the more information we have on our side, the better call we can make on our side to see where we can assist the consumer. And again, my last comment there is always just to make sure that if there is insurance on the account, that the consumer provides a claim on that, depending on the reasons for the change of circumstance, or that there is some sort of UIF claim that is submitted, again, obviously depending on what the change of circumstance is, so that there is at least some income coming into the consumer's household. And even though the payments are less coming to us, there are at least payments being made, coupled with the proposal to say for the next couple of months, the consumer can only pay X amount, and then we can record that on our system. I'm going to share the next slide for you, which is a very nice little infographic that Shannon drew up for us when the guidelines and the change of circumstance circular was issued last year. And this gives a nice sort of one-pager on the contact email address. It tells you on the various types of change of circumstance that we generally see within the industry, a split between the temporary loss of income versus the complete loss of income. And then each and every single one of those portfolios then contain what we would need. So as an example, for maternity leave, we would need medical proof, letter from the employer, confirmation that the consumer has submitted a claim from UIF, and potentially a new proposal on that, so that we know for the next 4 months, for example, we will be getting X going forward and not Y anymore. It gives you a nice little indication of the insurance claim versus the yes and the no, and a nice little note on the documents that we will require if the consumer is, or if the change of circumstance occurred before court or after the court process. So you guys are happy to take a photo of that or a screenshot of that if you want. I will include this in the email transmission to everybody after this webinar, so that you have this PDA or this PDF guideline. But you should have, I did transmit that during the course of last year. I'm going to move on to terminations because that is also quite an important topic in perhaps debt counselors understanding why we terminate accounts where we do. So our mandate when it comes to terminations is really just simple, and that's following the terminations as per what the Act dictates, and that we will terminate if there's no payments for 60 business days. Your Sanlam personal loan accounts are a little bit different in that they'll terminate when the account is 3 installments in arrears. Now, what's important here for you to note is that what this potentially could mean is that a consumer is paying every single month on their Sanlam personal loan accounts. But if they are short paying by a few rands, and all those arrear payments add up to 3 installments worth of arrears, the account will then be terminated. And what this translates to is that then you're potentially getting a termination on an account that's paying. So it's very important to note that if there is a consent or a court order in place, that the consumer maintains those exact payments. And that really goes for all the accounts that we administer. Because if the consumer knows what he needs to pay and the PDA system takes off the funds or distributes it as per what should be done, then the consumer should not be falling into arrears on those Sanlam accounts. It must be noted that before we terminate, there are a number of actions that we do on our side. So all debt counselors will be provided with a pre-termination list. And what this spreadsheet will contain is a list of all the consumers that have been targeted for termination. And they've been targeted because there hasn't been payments for 60 business days. We can provide you with a consolidated pre-termination list, or there is an option to have individual lists per account. A far majority of the debt counselors out there prefer just one spreadsheet with all the information on there. And again, what we then urge you to do is just to provide us with proof of payment if payment has been made to the PDA or to us, or perhaps to our client directly. Then we can remove that account from that pre-termination list. And there is a little time frame on that email that you receive that sets out that when we need information by, and we will then remove that account from the pre-termination list if there is proof of payment provided. On this, your consumers will be getting a SMS advising of any short or non-payments. And the reason we've gone this route is really just to ensure the consumers are part of their debt review process. And that's also part of the reasons why we have a consumer portal as well, is to get consumers involved in their financial affairs throughout debt review, and not just to leave it in your space and say, oh, my debt counselor will sort it out. They need to also be proactively involved in it. And that is why we will send an SMS to them to say, look, you have short paid on your account, or we have not received a payment on the account, so that can potentially get them to engage with you to find out, is there an issue perhaps with the payment distribution, and then to resolve it so that we don't have to go down the route of terminating the consumer and then having to reinstate them because payments were not made at the correct channel. It's important for me here to maybe just talk about the reinstatements. So there are a number of reasons why we could reinstate an account. I mean, we do have a general view of not holding the consumer liable if there's been errors by other parties. So we're not going to not reinstate an account because perhaps it fell off the PDA plan, for example. But what we would need is some sort of commitment from the consumer that they pay the arrears back. So our general rule is 3 months agreed installment. The reason why it's 3 months is because that's the 3-month period that we take before we terminate an account. And that arrear payment would have to be made so that the account gets brought back into current, not in arrears anymore, and we can then reinstate that account. Should the consumer not be in a position to perhaps make one big payment, we can make a concession here to say that it can be done over 2 or 3 months. But again, that will depend on the merits of the matter. It would depend on how much the arrears are on the account. But we would need some sort of commitment from the consumer to show, firstly, that they were not at fault. You know, they didn't default purposefully. And number two, if they did, how are they now in a position where they can make the payment going forward? What was the reason for them not making payment? Again, as much information as we have will help us in getting a mandate to reinstate this account, and he can then continue within his debt review process. So guys, those are the main sections within our company I think that a lot of debt counselors need clarity on. We can now move on to the Q&A. Shannon, do you just want to have a look for me I saw we got a number of questions here.
Hi, yes, Jas, we do. I've got them ready to discuss with you.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to start with one to do with proposals, which was
Yes.
Why not? Does the DCRS rules not apply on a pro rata?
Okay, so a pro rata proposal is really just within the credit provider's space to decide what their mandate is, okay, on how they're going to handle a proposal that doesn't form part of DCRS rules. So our mandate that we have from our clients is to apply certain components of DCRS, which in general is the term extensions, dependent on the balance on the account. So it's partly term-based, and our internal mandate from our clients is to run on that interest rate that that I have discussed on here, whether it's the 9 or the 12%. That's just the mandate that we have as a credit provider. So yes, it is great if we can get a DCRS proposal, because that means that there will be an automatic acceptance. But unfortunately, in terms of a pro rata proposal, that decision on what's accepted sits in the credit provider space. And that's something that we have to act on the mandate from our clients.
Thank you. There's a couple of DREX questions which I'm going to keep to the end, just because I think a lot of them will be answered in that section, but I'll keep them just in case. With regards to EdCon, how can a debt counsellor assess whether the account is with CF or Nimble from their side?
Okay, so that's a good question. I want to be the bearer of bad news, as that there isn't a way, unfortunately. The only way in which you can determine if an account is either with us or with Nimble is for you to provide us with a 17.1. What we will do on our side is we will consult on the RCS system. If the account is with RCS, we will provide you with a COB. If the account is not with RCS, it would then mean that the account is with Nimble, and we will then provide you with a letter where we will advise you that the account is not with us or with RCS, and that they need to contact Nimble, and there will be an email address for them to contact. So unfortunately, there's no way outside of contacting Consumer Friend first.
Fair enough. Thank you. And then do you have any suggestions as to who a DC could contact for updated balances and queries in respect of existing EdCon clients?
Great. So I think the best port of call is to get hold of Consumer Friend first. So go through our normal channels. If the account is with us, we will obviously provide you with that information. If the account is not with us, we will then provide you with an email directing you to Nimble. So I think for any EdCon related queries, I think let Consumer Friend be your first port of call. We have put it out there that we are here to engage with the industry and help with the industry, just simply because we know that it was left in such a space where debt counsellors don't know where the account is. They don't have much information on it. So let us be your first port of call. Ask us the question. We will find the answers for you, and we will either report back with an answer as to what the balance is or the status of the account, or if the account is not with us, we will then direct you where you need to go to get the information.
Perfect. Now, in terms of extensions, in most cases, if it's a 2 to 3 month payment extension requested, instead of doing a full payment proposal, can one request that the approved payments be extended and explain that in the 17.3 for the period requested?
So I think what we would need some information there is how is the arrears going to be addressed? So remember, if the consumer is making payments every single month, he's not going to get terminated by Consumer Friend, because we terminate on a non-payment for 60 business days. But I think what's important to note here is that there needs to be some sort of confirmation of what's going to happen to the arrears. If the consumer pays every month, but he short pays, yes, the arrears will accrue on the account. It will be added onto the account. That's whether there is a proposal or not. That's just how it generally happens. Even if there isn't a change of circumstance, if the consumer short pays, then the arrears is automatically included in the actual balance, and it accrues. So we can't, on a sort of special request, add the arrears on. It will happen anyway. The problem we face is if you're saying there's going to be no payments for 60 business days. Unfortunately, we aren't in a position where we can agree to that mandate to say, look, it's okay for the consumer not to pay for 5 months. He must pay on month 6, and the arrears will be on the account. There would have to be some sort of payments within that 3-month period to stop the consumer from terminating.
Okay, I see. Another question that came through with regards to court orders, would the court order have to be varied in cases where the amended proposal is submitted?
Good question. I was hoping that question wouldn't come up because it's a very tricky answer.
And so, who does the cost land with in that scenario?
That's what I was waiting for. So look, guys, we have to follow the guidelines that the NCR has issued. And the guidelines state that if there is an order, it needs to be varied. Okay. The reason for that is because there's a court order that has restructured this consumer's debt. I can't, by law, ignore a court order to make an arrangement with you outside of that process, because then I'm in default of that order. So yes, the correct process would be to vary the court order. I understand that it is not always practical to go back to court to pay another X thousand rand to get the court order varied, potentially for only a couple of months. So the only thing that I can say there is try and maintain payments on that account, try and make sure that there are at least some payments on the account, especially if it's just for a temporary measure, because the consumer will get back to a time where they are able to pay those funds like they had agreed in terms of the order. We will insist or ask that the court order gets varied in order for us to assess the proposal. So we will not be able to make an arrangement with you if there is already a court order in place, unless we know that you are going to be varying the court order. Unfortunately, that is the stance that we would have to take in line with the guidelines from the NCR. But again, all that I can say here is maintain some sort of payment on the account to stop the account from terminating. We will note on our system that there has been a change of circumstance, but unfortunately, we can't respond to your proposal or issue an acceptance if there is already a court order in place.
Great. I think this question comes up a lot, and it's, how does one prove expected income?
Sure. Look, again, it just depends on what the change of circumstance is. You know, if the consumer's taken a pay cut, it's very easy to prove that because there's generally a letter from the employer. If it's a situation where the person is self-employed, for example, their contracts don't run anymore, that's dried up. So they expect one or two things to come in within the next month, well, then there isn't a way in which you can prove it. But what you then can do is just provide us with a letter where you've set out the circumstances of the consumer's change in circumstance, that you are not able to put an amount forward. What we need to just understand here is that the consumer needs to have some sort of income in order to be under debt review. So I think bear that in mind, but I think, again, as much information as we get that can be escalated, it can be sent through to us. But if you can't prove it, then obviously you can't prove it. But then give us as much information as you can as to why you can't necessarily submit a proposal to us, and we will just record that on our side.
Sure. Okay. And then lastly for this section, and I know I haven't asked all the questions that came through, but I've done that on purpose because some will be more appropriate for the next section. And that is, consumers don't generally have separate credit life insurance to that which is included in the credit agreement. So why then is an affidavit required to confirm this?
Just repeat that question again, Shan.
So
I lost it midway.
If a consumer doesn't have credit life insurance separate to the credit agreement that had credit life insurance with it, that generally doesn't happen. So why then is an affidavit required to confirm this?
The reason why we've asked for that affidavit, again, is in line with the guidelines in terms of the NCR. So we have to follow those guidelines from the NCR. It is in there. And I think the reason behind that is because there needs to be some sort of confirmation that the consumer doesn't have it, that we're perhaps not aware of. You know, there could be reasons why the consumer doesn't want to put a claim through. And I suspect that could be a reason why it's been put in there to say, look, there has to be an affidavit. Again, I know it's not always practical to get it, but let's get some sort of email perhaps from the consumer or something. If he can't get to a police station or he can't get to a person who can commission the affidavit for him, at least give us something that we've got on. Ideally, yes, we would like the affidavit, but if it's practically impossible for the consumer to do that, find an alternative that's as close to that as possible, and email, a direct email from them, which can prove that they had sent it. Then we can record that on our side.
Okay, great. There's been a whole bunch of extra questions that have come through as we've been chatting.
Okay.
Would you like to answer a few more? Would you like to carry on and we get back to these?
Are there ones that are sort of the same, Shannon, or is it?
No, there's some other ones quite specific to specific accounts, for instance.
Okay. Let's maybe do one or two questions so we can move on to the next.
Okay.
To the next slide, yeah.
One has come through from Kim saying, what is the max term you'll accept for Sanlam accounts?
So your Sanlam personal loan accounts, the max term there is 96 months. Just because they are a loan-based product, their balances are significantly higher. So for your non-DCRS rules, of course, in terms of DCRS, it's obviously kept at 60, but for your non-DCRS, maximum of 96 months.
Okay, great. And with regards to 17.3s, in terms of maternity leave, it's quite difficult to do a payment proposal with the backlog at UIF and consumers not always knowing what they're going to receive when.
Okay.
So what do they do in that regard?
Okay, I think in that regard, if you're not in a position to provide a proposal, you can't. But I think just advise us that you aren't in a position to provide a proposal, that the documents have been submitted to to UIF, and that once we get feedback, you'll then be able to provide us with that information. I think if you just sort of advise us that, not just send the 17.3, but advise us that you understand that there's missing documentation, but you physically cannot provide it because you don't have the necessary information. Just give us that information and we'll note it on our side. And once you get it, you can then send that through to us.
Okay, cool. And there's one question that's been asked numerous times, so I think I'll go ahead with that one. And it's about aged EdCon accounts. If the account is not with RCS or Nimble, where to next? Or not with Consumer Friend or Nimble, where do they go to from there?
Okay, that's a good question. So we have found there are a batch of accounts that somehow throughout the process of it moving didn't move. That's the only way that I can explain it. So it's in this limbo state. So what's happened is they have RCS have put in a process where TransUnion can be contacted for the bureau update to be done, and any information on that account. So unfortunately, we can't answer to that, and neither can Nimble as well. What I will do is I do have a correspondence that I generally send out to debt counselors where I explain who they can send it through to.
Perfect.
I'll include that in the pack, Shannon, when I send it through. Yeah.
Fantastic. All right, let's continue and we'll come back to some of the other questions later.
Okay, good idea. Good idea. All right, guys, we're going to move on to the Contact Us page. So we're going to go through this quite quickly. Again, these are our main contact points, broken down per, I guess, depending where in the process the consumer is and what the document is that you are sending through to us. So you're happy to take a screenshot of that or a photo of that. I will include, like I've said, a mandate in the communication to you guys that'll have all the contact points on. I'm going to go through to the second page just to give you the contact points of the remaining matters. I think what is important here, guys, is that you not CC multiple email addresses. So just to give you a background as to how our task management works at Consumer Friend, is when we receive an email or a task through the portal, a task is created on our side depending on where it's been sent. So if you are sending a proposal to applications, to proposals, to courts, to customer accounts, and you're copying me in, for example, on the thought that it would get a quicker attention, it really won't. And the reason it won't is because tasks that aren't due to be worked by that specific department will be closed off. And only the department that's been catered to work with that specific document will actually work that document. So it is time consuming on our side to have to look at a task and close off a task that's not necessary because multiple email addresses are used. So if I can please appeal to all debt counselors out there, if you can just double check on your system vendors as well to ensure that the correct documents are being transmitted to the correct email address only. You're not going to get a faster turnaround time if you're sending it to everybody. You're not going to be covering your bases. The information is available to you on who you need to email or which department you need to email a specific document to. Please, I appeal to you to only stick to that email address. We have also noted a number of debt counselors and people within the industry are sending emails to our info@ email address. I'd like to urge you guys to not go that route. That email address is simply for that information on Consumer Friend, on what we do, on how we do. It doesn't deal with operational processes at all. So please, if you can remove that from any of your email lists that you have and only use these contact points that I'm providing to you now, we will really appreciate that. I'm not going to go and sort of read through every single one of them, but they are self-explanatory. You guys will notice that there aren't any new email addresses that we have added. But what I'm going to do in the next slide is just chat or just show you our escalation points, which I think is important. So we've set out an escalation channel for each and every single department based on a turnaround time. So if we look at the first one, for example, any of your 17.1s and 2s and Ws that you send to any applications at Consumer Friend email address, our general turnaround time is 5 business days. So if you have not received it, as an example, a COB, you've sent a 17.1 to applications, 5 business days have passed, you haven't received a response in line with a COB or any letter advising anything with that account, you would then escalate that through to Noel Consumer Friend. So all these parties under the contact details for escalation, which is the last column here, those are your team leaders for all of those departments. So if the turnaround time has passed in relation to the contact details that you've used, please will you address it with the appropriate team leader. We have processes in place to monitor that on their side. They have a very strict turnaround time on when they get escalations on their side. So it's important that they work that. So if you're not getting the responses, don't resend it to the same email address. I urge you to use the escalations channel. That's what it is there for. And then again, if all else fails, you've gone through this whole process, you're welcome to send it to our complaints email address. It's manned by the ever diligent Chantal Rousseau, who I'm sure you guys have dealt with at some point in time, and she will ensure that everything is done. So please don't send something to complaints just because it is urgent. Rather use the escalation channel if it's an urgent matter, for example. But otherwise, I would urge you to please just stick to this email channel, stick to the escalations list, and if those avenues unfortunately have failed, then by all means contact the complaints email box. We have a very strict monitoring of turnaround times there as well. And again, just a reminder, please do not CC multiple email addresses. It's really just a time-consuming exercise on our side, and it's not going to be handled any quicker, perhaps. In fact, it may just stall other processes because tasks have to be closed off that don't need to be worked by a specific department. But like I said, I will include this mandate and the contact point mandate within the email correspondence I send through to you. Q&A on points of contact. Shannon, have we received anything that you can see offhand?
I'm just having a look here. No, it's not necessarily to do with points of contact. I think we can continue on and we will share those points of contacts via email after the fact.
Yes, perfect. All right, let's move on to papaya, the dreaded papaya. So guys, look, we did have a webinar on this last year, and I've just included again just a little summary of why the papaya is put into place. I'm not going to go through it, it just gives you a nice indication. But what it just aims to do is just to promote personal information processed by public and private bodies. Okay, how it's transmitted so that it's not intercepted and used for means that it shouldn't be used for. Again, there was a 12-month a 12 months grace put in place from the beginning of July last year, and the new time frame where it's going to be implemented. Our deadline is on the 1st of July of this year. So it's a little bit less than 3 months away, 2.5 months away. I urge you guys not to leave this until the 1st of June or the 30th of June to look at. It's something we need to address immediately, because it does have far-reaching issues happening with us. So what are our solutions? I think the 3 main solutions that I want to talk about is your engagement with us and our engagement with you, because at the end of the day, that's what we need to look at. The first port of call, or the first solution, again, is the most common solution out there, and that's the DREX portal access. Okay, we've had access to DREX for a number of years already. It's fully POPI compliant. All your documents are available on there. There's no emailing back and forth to obtain the documents. It's a login process that is secure. It's accessed by username and a password. The consumers get a one-time PIN, so it's very secure. And most importantly, there's consumer and debt counselor accessibility. So what's awesome here is that you don't need to send emails or updated balances or information to your consumers. You get them to access the portal. You get them to get their paid up letters, their statements, their payment histories on the portal, fully POPI compliant. There's less work on your side. So I think at the very least, there is a platform available as we sit right now today, and there has been for a number of years. The next solution that we can talk about is email encryption. Now, this is not exactly an ideal avenue that we want to go down. And the reason I say this is because there's a lot of development needs to be done in encrypting an email. And when you receive an encrypted email or a password protected email, there's obviously admin behind it and trying to decrypt it and putting the password in, etc. But I think what's important to understand under the email encryption is simply that the responsibility lies on the party that's transmitting the information to ensure that the information on that email or on that transmission is secure, it's supposed to be sent to the right parties, that the information is hidden, etc., and that it complies with POPI. So if you send us an email post the 1st of July and it's not protected, or there's personal information of a multitude of consumers on there that hasn't been hidden or anything like that, we won't be the ones that are non-compliant. It would be you on your side. Again, we will not be sending emails back to you as the debt counselor with a COB. The COB will be placed on the portal. And on my next point, I'll talk about the integration. But what's important is that we can never, or we will never send the documentation through to you, but we will point you into the direction of where the documentation can be obtained. So not ideal, but it is a solution there for you. So it's important that we start talking about the next step, which is our integration. Again, this is going to be by far the most or the best process to handle this whole POPI nightmare. It not only addresses POPI, but it addresses efficiencies as well, which is what we've been trying to push for the last couple of years. So again, integration is broken down into 2 aspects. The first aspect is the consumer friend integration directly. So yes, we have the option for you as a debt counselor to integrate directly with us. We've got a spec available. You can reach out and contact us, and we will provide you with the necessary documentation to start that communication. And what it will entail is our system will speak to your system and vice versa without you having to send an email. So however the process works in IT jargon language, a 17.1 will be transmitted, we will receive it, decode it, generate the COB, send it to you, you will receive it, decode it, and the COB will be there. There won't be any emails or faxes or anything like that because of the integration between us. So that is an option out there. We are ready to rock and roll with it. We've had the spec up and running for a while. So if you are ready to integrate with us or you want some more information on that, please reach out to us. You can reach out to me directly. I'll put you in contact or in touch with the correct parties on our side, and let's get the discussion started now. Let's not wait until 2 days before the 1st of July, because there is obviously going to be a time period involved in trying to get the integration running. So I urge you guys to please look at this urgently. The second option under the integration option is again through our system vendors. And by system vendors, I obviously mean your FinWise, Maximus, Simplicity, and IPDA systems. We have been in constant communication with them, and we're working very closely with with the system vendors on integration. So if you use them in the CRM in your processing, you will automatically become POPI compliant. So which means if you send or if you use their system to transmit in a process where there is, we will receive the 17.1 through the IT highway, we will decrypt it, we will do things available, and we will send the CU. If you want to reach out to your system vendor, by all means, I can give you an update as to where we are, but we're working very hard together to try and get this done before the 1st of July. So guys, I think what you can take away from this again are the options available to you. I would urge you to go the integration option. POPI aside, I think just on a efficiency process, it just makes sense. Important you guys and make this whole process POPI compliant and as well as efficient on that. Q&A on this. I'm going to assume that there are a couple of questions on this slide particular.
Yes. Yes.
Are there? Okay.
Okay, so from a DREX perspective, what do they do if documents are not available on DREX, documents that they require?
Okay, so if documents are not available, again, I urge you to reach out to us. The only reason I can think of the documents not being on our system is more your historical matters, in which case reach out to us via our normal channels. We will get the document through to you. So there is an option available. It's not lost forever, but we will get that document through to you if it is not on the DREX portal.
Okay, it's a rarity, but there's an option there if you have an issue.
Yeah, there's an option, yeah.
So in terms of court documents, this particular DC would like to know how will we be able to serve court documents if Consumer Friend do not receive these via email from us?
Okay, so that's a very good question. So again, with our integration that is being discussed, there will be a transmission process for these documents to be sent, and we will set up an internal response to that email, which will advise. So even though it's done electronically and there's no email being sent, when it's received, we will be sending a transmission letter, if I can call it that, saying that that court application has been received, which will really have the same result as you using a email proof of sending in your court documentation. You would attach that to say that it has been conceived by what has been received by Consumer Friend. Again, like we've said, there are situations where if we do receive the email and you've gone the encryption method, we will obviously advise you will then have that email proof to actually provide. But in terms of integration, we are working on a process where you will get a document back advising you that it has been delivered.
Great. 2 questions I can even answer, but I'll let you answer, Justin. The first one would be, can we submit 17.1 directly on DREX? And the other is, can the client go onto the DREX system, or should we give them our login?
Okay, good questions. Okay, so your first question, yes, you can submit all documentation. In the demo that I will go through, I will show you exactly how to do that. It's a very efficient process. You select the department it needs to go to, you upload the document, you write an email, and you click send. It's as simple as that. It will then create a task in our world, like I explained to you earlier, and we'll work that task. So yes, it is possible. Consumers, in terms of your second question, consumers will have their own login. Again, but it's important to note here is that you do not give them your login details, because they'll be able to access or potentially all the IDs under their system. They'll be able to do a lot more that you perhaps don't want them to do on the system. So they have their own login process where you have an email address as your login. Their login is the ID number. So it's a completely different, it's the same system, but it's a completely different logging process. So I urge you, if the consumer would like to access DREX, you can ask us to create that for you, or you can direct the consumer to us, and we will be in touch with the consumer, and we'll create a login for them. But there are 2 separate logins, so please don't give your consumer your
Don't give anyone your logins. Yes,
Correct.
there are two separate portals. So Justin will be demoing the consumer portal versus the debt counseling portal. So that will probably answer that. Just, I think you can continue there.
Okay, great. Okay, so guys, next, information technology. So this is where I'm going to go through the demo. Before I do this, I just want to talk to you about why you should use DREX. There may be a couple of debt counselors on here that are perhaps new. So again, what is DREX? DREX is a platform that we have offered for debt counselors to use and to log into to obtain any information they need on their consumers with Consumer Friend. It's obviously a lot more than that it can do. I'm not going to go into that. I'll show you a little link a little bit later on down these slides if you want some more information on the switch, for example. But right here, it's just to give you some information on DREX. So again, you can obtain your balances, your statements, and important documentation that's saved there for you. You don't ever have to save these documents, or if you lose them or you can't find them, you log onto the portal, you download it. So it does it for you. You can access it from everywhere. I've tried it on my phone and it's worked. We've done it on our iPads and it's worked. So it's very easy for you to access it anywhere you want, at home, at the office. It doesn't matter. You can easily download your statements and your debt review documentation. It downloads it as a PDF document that you can forward on to your consumer if you need to, or if you need to save it on your side. It's easy to do that. And again, there's no need to contact our call center or send an email. So again, here is where Poppy comes in. But again, guys, efficiencies, we need to start thinking clever here. How do we think clever? We integrate and we use a portal so we don't have to spend time and effort into phoning and holding and sending an email and waiting for a turnaround time. We can log on and we can get the documents ourselves. So how do you access the portal? You can send an email to that drexsupport@consumerfriend.co.za email address. There is a specific form, which what I will do is I will include that in the email transmission. Shannon, if you can just make a note of that so I don't forget. I'll include that in the email transmission to you. And it's literally just a name, a surname, and an email address that I will need of the agent that needs the access. It's important that you include all NCRDC numbers that are linked to your business. So if you've got 4 or 5 debt counselors under there, and you want the consumer to access all of those debt counselors, you need to provide me with all of those NCRDC numbers. If you only want this agent to perhaps only work with 2 of the NCRDC numbers, and only supply those 2, and we will link it accordingly. They will receive their own login. They will receive their own password. You don't need to share usernames on your side. We're happy to create 100 users if you need to. So get in touch. We can create that and have the person have their own login. They don't have to worry about borrowing and resetting the password. And now everybody who's using the same user now can't log in because the password's been reset. Let the agent have their own access, and it's a lot easier to manage it that way. And again, the login to the portal is drex.consumerfriend.co.za/drex, and that'll take you to the portal. I just want to obviously talked about consumers can access the portal too. I don't think debt counselors should be spending time sending paid up letters and statements to their consumers. Again, I spoke to this earlier. Let's get consumers involved in their debt review. Let's get them responsible. Let's get them involved in it. And the best way to do that is to give them access to DREX, where they can look and see, oh, my payments are coming in every month. Great. My balance is going down. I can look at my court order if I need to. I can look at the balances. I can request a settlement if I need to. There's so much work that goes into running this, and why should you be doing it as a debt counselor? Let's give it to your consumer to run with. Again, they can also download paid up letters and their statements. What we can do is we can partner with you and get in touch with your clients in the portal. So if we get into an arrangement where we can contact your consumer and we can put them in touch with the right people on our side to get them to log in, we're happy to work with you on that. What we can also do, and this is something Shannon will be doing nonetheless, is to include some sort of sign-up documentation that we can perhaps include in your welcome pack that you send through to your new consumers to say, here's the DREX portal, this is what it is, register here, you'll have access to X, Y, and Z, so that your new consumers can then log in automatically when they sign up for debt review. So guys, I spoke about Switch, and really this is just a next generation software solution which enables credit providers to access debt review data electronically. So our idea is that there's one switch where credit providers plug in, they feed out to debt counselors feed into the switch, and it feeds out to the credit providers. So if you want some more information on there, you can click on this little link. You won't be able to click on the link, but what I'll do is I'll also include this in the documentation for you. But if you want to just take a screenshot or a photo of that, you're welcome to go to that website, and it'll be a little video walkthrough of what exactly it entails, how it would work. It is very exciting, guys. It is exactly what it is, next generation. It will make everyone's life so much easier. So look through that. Let's get the conversation going. I think it's important for all credit providers and debt counselors to get on board here, and let's solve the solution together. I think we need to start thinking clever here. Right, I'm going to go into the demo, but before I do, just ignore this link. This is just a link to direct me to do the actual demo. So the link to the portal is not different. This is just for me to do the demo for you. But just to talk about a user guide, Shannon is busy putting together a nice debt counselor user guide on the DREX portal, which gives you screenshots on where to click and where to go. And she's going to do a consumer guide as well, which we'll include in the email correspondence to you. Feel free to send that to your consumers. It's really a simple, easy to use guide showing consumers how to log on, how to view their statements as an example. And then and then it's just a lot easier for people to know. You can have it on your desks, print it next to your desk, have it as a PDF on your computer if you do get stuck. Before I go into the Q&A, I am going to stop my share here, and I am just going to share our DREX portal, and then we can do a thing. Go, and we're going to share. Shannon, just confirm with me that you can see the DREX start page.
Yes, perfect.
Perfect. All right, guys. So welcome to the new rebranding of DREX. We wanted to rebrand DREX. It's been on the market for a while. It needed a fresh little jolt, which it's done. I think it looks amazing. I love the graphics behind it. I love the new logo. So during the course of next week,
Tuesday,
this will be good.
To be exact.
There we go. So we will send out communication prior to this time. But this will be your login screen that you receive when you go into the DREX portal. So again, ignore the URL up here. The URL has not changed. I'm just using this to do the demo for you. I think the best way for me to start is perhaps just to look at the consumer portal, just simply because I think it's important for you to understand how the consumer portal works and what it looks like. So again, the username for the consumer will be the ID number. So I'm just going to type in an ID number that I have here. Just bear with me. And then they obviously have their own password. And you click login. And hopefully there will not be any internet gremlins. So while that loads, this will give you a nice view of what the consumer will see on their side. And I think it's important, if the consumer phones you or asks you for something, at least you're in a position to tell me exactly how it's going to look, where to click. You can provide them with that PDF as well. But I think it'll be just nice for you to view it on their side. Let's just wait for this to do its thing. There we go. All right, so this is what the consumer will see immediately once they have logged in. Now, where it's different, and you'll see where it's different from your login, is you have your little ID search at the top there. This is different for the consumer because all they need to see are accounts linked to them. So they'll see their names, their ID number, their status, where they are, and they'll be able to see a list of all of their accounts. So you'll see this is exactly the same as what the Debt Counselor portal will look like with the new rebranding. You've got the new logo here, and you've also got the new, the person's login details there. So obviously, in this case, it's the person's ID number. And here they'll be able to see all of the accounts that they have. So they'll see that they've got all these accounts, what the current outstanding balance is. They'll be able to see the account status, which is important. So they'll know that all of their accounts are almost paid up. They've only got the one RCS account left over. What the current interest rate is that the consumer is expected to pay in line of, and their expected installment. All right, so on the face of it, the consumer can see exactly where they are. They also have the accounts tab, which lists the account. They've got a documents tab, which has got all the documents in there for them to access their paid up letter. So they'll just click it. It will then download the paid up letter, and that will be the end of it. Okay, so it's very important that you note that under the view column, if you click on that little button there, that will give them to actually download the document, and they'll be able to view it from there. So all the documents are there from the consumer. Again, it's also important to note that there are perhaps, if there are a number of documentations, that you always just get them to check. Sometimes consumers will say it's not on the portal. It perhaps is, it's just on another page. So a way of looking at that is you can simply just click on 20 lines per page, and it'll obviously show more data, or you just click on the next page and it'll take you to the next page where all the documents are. And they've also got email access to all the emails that are sent. So the emails that are sent will only be those emails where we've sent a consent, for example, or we've sent the COB. It won't be documentation between us and you, for example. So again, under the accounts tab, if they want to generate a statement, they click on this little sort of round circle with a little clock on. It will give them a nice little generate statement view, and they'll be able to select the date there to download their statement. So I will show this for you in the debt counselor portion. It's exactly the same, but I think it's important for you just to see what it's going to look like for the consumer. That's how it's going to look like. It's very basic, it's very simple, and it is different to the debt counselor portal. And that's why we urge you not to give your details out to everybody or to the consumer, because they should only have access to their details. So I'm going to just move this. Let's log out here quickly. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to log into the portal that is for the debt counselor. So I've got a debt counselor here. We're going to log in. So you guys are aware of the basic look on where it is before. So again, it's a lot different here. You have DREX, consumer portal. You've got your banking details at the bottom left-hand corner, which are our banking details. So automatically you have already got that. We have your contact details at the bottom right-hand side of this DREX thing here as well. You have your login details there. So that's where you would log out, for example. Again, when you click this DREX button, it will always take you back to this page. So if you are on a page for a consumer and you want to go back to the search button, you just click on DREX and it will bring you back to this page. So you'll always be faced with this first blank page with a little search bar here. And this is the search bar in which you would put the consumer's ID number in. So again, I have got an ID number here, which we're going to put in. And you will click search, or you'll click enter on your screen. So again, this should be very familiar to you guys, but for the rebranding, you have the consumer's ID number, their title, their first name, their surname, and the profile status of this account. So this tells you exactly where he is in the process. Here we can see that he is in a court order granted state, which means we should have a court order in place. And on the first view of it, you have a complete view of all the consumer's accounts here. So he's got a number of accounts. You can just click on this button here to show if there are, so you don't have to go to the next page if there are more accounts. But this immediately tells you that you have 2 accounts that are currently have balances on, because the rest are all settled. You've got the credit provider in this column over here. You've got the account type in this column, and you've got your sub-credit provider in this column. This is also very important, especially for those credit providers that have a lot of subcategories under their portfolio, RCS being one of them. So you can immediately see that's the RCS game account, and that's a personal loan account. For Fushini, that's the Markins account, and so on. You've got your account status here, which tells you where this account is. So even though you can see here where it says profile status, it says court order granted, that's where the consumer is as a status in themselves within the debt review process. But the statuses within the accounts individually may be different. So your active accounts should, in theory, be your profile status accounts. Where the accounts are paid up, they've obviously moved to paid up. If there is a terminated account, it would show termination 8610 or 883. If there is a consent, it would show consent granted. So you'll have your status on this particular account in this column over here. You've got your account number, so you can see exactly which account you are referring to, and that's the reference that you will use for all payments again. It gives you your outstanding balance column. So these are obviously bank because they are paid up. You've got two that have balances. You'll be able to see that there. You have your interest rate column, which shows you the current interest rate that it is being run on. So in these two, you can see that the interest rates are very low, which should give you an indication that the account is likely to have been restructured in terms of the court order. I get a lot of questions on, is this account restructured? So from your first login view onto a consumer's profile, you should immediately be able to see that there has been a restructure in place just based on the interest rate. It will just give you a guide. And then next to that, which is in the last column, it gives you an expected installment. So you know that the next installment for this RCS store card needs to be R584.80. Okay, so that's all the information you get on the first view on the accounts tab. Again, to show you just how to generate a statement, it's the same as per the consumer portal. You'll click on this little sort of clock arrow over here, and it'll open up a little drop-down screen where you will select the date range. If you only want a statement from right now, today, you will click on this little calendar button and you'll click today's date, and the end date will obviously be today's date, and you will click the download button and it'll download the statement for you. But it's always a good idea for you to generate a statement from inception of the account being under debt review, because that gives you a nice run of all the payments and the interest that has been charged. So in order to do that, you'll click on this little calendar button here. And in order to go back to when the consumer entered the debt review process, instead of clicking this little arrow to go back all the months and years, what you can do is you just click on the month and the year at the top, and that will bring up one back where you'll have it per year. You can click on that 2020 again, and that'll give you a range. So you don't want something within the 2000s, it needs to go back. You'll click that button again, and you can see the first available selection you have is 2019. So you know automatically that this consumer entered debt review in 2019. You would click that date range. You would click 2019 because that's when the consumer entered. And the first available selection is February, which means that the consumer would have entered a debt review in February of 2019. You would select that. And the first available date that you have is the 8th, which is the Friday, which means that he entered debt review, or we received a 17.1, or we sent out the COB on that date. You would select that date, so that would be your starting range, and your end range again would be today's date, because you want to know from inception of the consumer being on a debt review right through to current. You'll select the 15th and you'll click download, and depending on the system that you use, you will then be generated to a PDF. So I'm just going to close this off. You'll open up the statement, and there's the consumer's accounts. There's their statement from inception of account. So obviously there hasn't been much movement on this person's account because there haven't been payments. But in essence, you'll have, if there have been payments on the account, you'll have all the list of the payments, the transactions, and the balances. You've also got a confirmation of the banking details at the end of the page, so that you know where to make payments to. And that's how you download your statement on the account, and you can save it accordingly into your personal folders. If you would like to request for a settlement on an account, you would select, obviously, these two accounts are the only accounts capable of a settlement because all the other accounts are settled. So you would then click on your little pencil button. It will say that you would like to create a new settlement. You click OK, you say yes, and it will then create it for you. And you will view that when you log into your statement. It will show you what the settlement amount is. So just to show you, I'm only going to select today's date because that's the date that it would have logged it. Let's close this bar down and open it. And you'll see over here, there's a settlement amount. So obviously there's nothing being generated here because this is just the demo, but you'll see there your settlement amount will be there, and then that will be your settlement amount in that column, and that's what you would use to settle, and it will tell you when it's settled until. Okay, so you will be given a time frame on when you need to settle this. So what will then happen is that this new balance will be in place until the 22nd of April, or whichever date is there that you guys access. And once that date passes and the payment hasn't come in, the settlement will be removed. So which means what you will see is that this balance of let's assume that there was a settlement amount given, perhaps let's say of 10,000 Rand. So which means the balance here would have been 22,000 Rand. It will then revert back to the 32,000 Rand. So it will be removed after that time period if no payment has come in. So if you see a jump in the balance, that would be wise, because the settlement was generated, it wasn't actioned on, and the balance then reverts back to what it should be. To move on to the documents tab, again, self-explanatory. You click on the little tab there and you have a list of all your documents that you have for this consumer. I think what's important to note here is that there are a number of pages that happen. So I have received a number of questions from debt counsel where they say, you know what, the document isn't on there. And what we found is that people or agents are only looking at the first page. They're not going on to page 2 or to page 3. So it's important to know that. So again, the best way in which I do it when I work on this every day is I select the maximum amount of items per page, and you'll see that's brought it down to 1, which means everything has fit on this page here, and you'll be able to access it. And again, it's as simple as clicking on the view button, and it will be opening up a PDF for you, which you can then open and be able to view the document and save it, etc. So we've gone through a process on our side of renaming what the document is for, just to give you some sort of insight as to what it is. So we will always say in the beginning what it is. So you can see here it says COB, ID number, the credit provider name, and the account number. Here you can see that this is a paid up letter with the ID number, the credit provider, and the account number. So it's very important, just from an eye perspective, you can see immediately what you are looking for. We've also included a document type. And what's nice here is you can filter on these things. So let's say you only want an account number. So let's assume you want the paid up letter for this Woolworths loan. So what you would do is you would copy this account number, you would go to your documents, you would click on this little button at the top here, which is your filter button, and you would make sure that it says contains, and you would paste in the account number, and you click on filter, and it will filter on what you've put in, which means that that account number that you've put in has been filtered, and only documents that contain that account number will now reflect here. So you can automatically see there's the paid up letter that we sent, and there's the COB that we had sent at the time, and you'll be able to again view it, download it, save it at your time. Just remember that if you now need to go back, you just need to go to your filter button here. You need to clear your filter so that all the documents then show. So it's just a quicker process of you to get it, especially if you've got people that have been under debt review for a while and there's a myriad of documentation. It's a lot simpler than for you to look through each one. You paste in the account number in there, or you type in COB, for example, and it'll show you all the COBs as an example. So you just use that filter option. If we move on to our emails tab, again, these are all the emails that have been sent to this to the consumer. I'm going to make it up to 100, and you'll be able to download the actual email there. So very simple process. I think I've gone through the one thing I wanted to go through, sorry, and it was one of the questions that Shannon also asked is how to upload documents. So we have a little button here saying upload documents. So you would click on that document and it'll open up a little pop-up where you would select the email queue. So you'll remember earlier on I spoke about these, whether it's an email or a document upload that's been sent via the portal, it will go to a specific email queue for our agents to work on. So you would select the appropriate email queue. So let's just say, for example, you want to send a proposal, for example. You'll click on proposals. You'll write anything in. If you do want to, you don't have to. You can just leave it blank, or you can select your files, in which case it'll just open this for you. You can then select a document, and then you click save and close. And what that will do is it will send a new task to our workflow program, and our agents will then get that, and they will then work that, and they will respond to you on what you have sent us. So it's as easy as that as uploading documents. Consumers have the same option as well. They have the same upload documents. So for example, if there's a refund due and you need to tell the consumer to send a copy of their ID and a copy of their bank statement, you would ask them to go this route, and you would then have to send it through to customer accounts. You will select the files, they'll select the ID, they'll select their bank statement, save and close. That'll be sent to our customer accounts mailbox. It'll create a new task, and our agents will work at it from there. So it's literally that simple, guys. And you can just close that little box if you don't want to save anything. And that is the new look of the DREX module. Yeah, what do you guys think? I'm happy to take any questions, Shan, if there are. I'm going to leave this open in case there is a question on the portal itself.
Thanks, Just. There haven't been a whole lot of questions. I think two things that I think are important to discuss. One, if they have any issues with regards to DREX, they can't access something or they have an issue of any description, who specifically to contact in that situation. And the second one would be if a DC requires proof of the information they've obtained from the DREX portal. I know there's a way to retrieve that, so if you can explain that too.
Okay, so the first question, just repeat the second question, Shane. Which proof of
proof of information they've obtained from the DREX portal to get a printout of information that they've.
Okay, so the only thing that I can think of there is the actual document itself. So if you want the consent, for example, you'll download the consent. If you want the actual email proof, it'll be under the emails tab. You can download the actual email that was sent to the dead counsellor at the time, and you can use that as proof. But I think what's important to note here is that, especially once the 1st of July has now come in, we will send that correspondence almost like a form back to you advising you that it is there. So it won't be on this demo right now because it is something that we are looking into and developing, but that will be available for you then to download to show that Consumer Friend did receive document X at this time and at this date. Perfect. And the first question, can you just repeat that again?
The contact detail if there's any DREX concerns or queries.
Okay, so if you have any DREX related issues, so for example, password related issues, username related issues, you can send it through to the DREX support email address. They will be able to point you in the right direction. I've had some of the agents there literally have a little sort of Zoom sharing a screen and showing people how to log in and how to do things. So they are very helpful. So use that platform. Again, if you want to contact the customer accounts email address, which is our general call center email, you can send it through there to see if the agents can help you. But I think if it's a technical DREX specific related technical questions, send it through to DREX support. If it's more along something like an account is not appearing on the portal, for example, or a document is not appearing on the portal, send that correspondence through to the customer accounts email address in line with the points of contact that I've sent you, and they will then take it up, and if it needs to be loaded, they'll get it loaded or they'll send the document through to you.
Perfect. There's been a couple more questions come through as you were chatting then, one of which was for motivations on proposals, will we use the comments option in DREX or would we respond to your query or decline?
So I think at the beginning, I think it's always important to use the little recommendation box on that proposal. I think, we want to stop as many back and forths happening. So I think it's important for the dead counsellor to put as much information in that recommendation box. If you have received a decline and you've perhaps tweaked the proposal so that it's in line with that proposal, you will just resubmit a fresh proposal. If you want to comment on it, then you would just respond on that email, or you can send it via the portal to say, this was the issue that was had, this is my answer to it, and then send it through the normal channel. So it'll go through the normal communication. But I think at day dot, I think it's important that you put as much information on the proposal in the beginning, and then with the hope that we don't have this back and forth. But if it inevitably does happen, then you can just respond on that actual decline that we've sent through, and then we can engage and start that conversation and see if we can fix it along that way.
Perfect. I'm going to read this one as it came through, just so that we can recap. It says, just to recap, you will still upload the documents sent directly from the PDA, but for all other communication, we need to upload this via the portal. Okay, so again, you don't have to. I think what you can take away from that is to say, okay, it depends on how you want to go about it.
If you do want to not integrate with us or use any of the system vendors, then yes, you would have to log onto the portal and use the upload document functionality that I've gone through now and submit everything through there. Again, if you do send an email to us and it's non-compliant, again, it's the person sending the email that's non-compliant, not us in receiving it. But I think the important thing to take away from here is let's not go down all these options. I think first prize is to go integration. I think get in touch with us. Let's see if we can make it happen, so that we don't have to go through this process of uploading documentation. But that would be the only other alternative, yes.
Great. There's a lot of questions that I've just streamed through, and we are over time now. So what we'll do is we will respond to all of these questions via email, and you're all going to receive an email with a bunch of different attachments and all the questions answered at a later date or after this. Give us a little bit of time, but thank you to some of the GCs that have written some complimentary remarks on the Q&A as well.
That's awesome to hear. Okay, guys, I've just got one other option thing that I want to talk to you here, and let me just share my screen again. Just give me an yeah, I'll share it. Can you see?
Yes.
Perfect. All right. So guys, just an announcement from the Consumer Friend side. So I will be leaving the Consumer Friend space at the end of April. It's been a very long journey. I'm going to be pursuing other opportunities, some industry related. I will be around. This will not be the last that you will be hearing from me or seeing me. And I just want to say a special thank you to all the debt counselors out there that have been part of this journey with me. It's been awesome to, I've made so many friends and connections with everybody out there. And I think it's going to be awesome to see where this company goes. And just again, a special thanks from my side to the management of Consumer Friend and Upstream Group. I wouldn't be where I am here without the guidance and support from them. So a big shout out to the team. I work with an amazing bunch of people, I really do. And they really have the sort of heart of the consumer involved. Yeah, so I can only see this company going from strength to strength. So on that note, I want to introduce somebody that's very well known to you, which I'm pretty sure that you've dealt with at some point in time, who will be taking over the more debt counselor relationship role, escalations role within Consumer Friend. And that's our very own Chantal Rousseau. So she's our group customer experience manager. She comes with a wealth of experience, guys. When I was still based in Durban, I worked very closely with Chantal. She came with me to a lot of the roadshows and the other debt counselor meetings that I had. And anything that's sent through to Chantal, I promise you, she'll go to the ends of the world to try and get anything resolved. The only thing I ask is that please, guys, follow that point of contact list that I've sent through. Follow the escalations list. But Chantal's going to be your girl in resolving things that you would generally send to me. So we'll obviously send out correspondence closer to the end of the month for me to say my goodbyes. But that's going to be all from me. Shannon, I don't know if you want to add anything in closing or if we...
No, I guess it would be a thank you, Justin, for this webinar and all the webinars that have come before. Yeah, a very, very tough moment to say goodbye to you at the end of the month. And we'll miss you dearly. And I know the whole industry will, Mr. Debt Review. But we will all still be in contact, I'm sure. And to the debt counselors, this won't be the last webinar due to Justin leaving. We will continue to try and help the industry as much as we can. And as always, if you have any suggestions or any particular points that you'd like us to cover or topics you'd like us to cover, let us know. We're interested and we want to help. So thank you, Justin, for this and all those that have passed.
No, cool. Thanks, Shannon. Thanks, everyone. And please don't be a stranger. Stay in touch. Be safe. Be blessed. And until we meet again, ciao, everyone.